the DC Elite or the DC-Tonfa? Do you have to choose?
Welcome to TAP channel.
Hi everyone, Yang here. It's another week on our YouTube channel at The Audio People, and we bring unique impressions of the latest earphones, headphones, and music players or DAPs, and unique insights into the portable audio industry. So let's get the elephant out of the room. Is the DC-Tonfa a replacement to the DC Elite for those of you who are curious? The very quick and short answer is no, and that's quite indicative in how iBasso priced these two dongles, with the DC-Tonfa being the more affordable variant where it's $120 cheaper than the DC Elite. So to break down how we're going to approach this video, we're going to show you the spec sheet comparison between the DC Elite and DC-Tonfa. Of course, by putting the spec sheet side to side, right, it's more important to put meaning into them, and then we will go and explain into some of the specs which I think it will be quite important to break down for the rest of you. And then we move on into talking about the chassis of both of them, the differences in the mechanisms of both of these dongles, and as we go on, we then move on into its signature and how it pairs, and finally when you get them. So without further ado, let's start. So let's start with the spec sheet on a side-by-side comparison for both the Tonfa and the DC Elite, and you can see now on your screen. And on the DAC component, the DC-Tonfa has been very well marketed as 24-bit 8-channel fully balanced discrete R2R ladder network, and that is the one thing that I think a lot of people now are looking for. Now versus the DC Elite's very famous ROHM BD34301 DAC component, and DC Elite has been ongoing now for about 2 years, and yet I think there are no dongle on the market that currently can replace its DAC architecture and how it's able to implement it. Now on the amp side, the DC-Tonfa has 2 dual op amps and 4 of the BUF634A buffers. And what do these actually mean for you? We would break it down later on to how it affects signature, and even more so onto the synergies with pairings. And one of the standout specs between Tonfa and Elite is the output power. At the 4.4mm output termination, the Tonfa is able to output significantly more, and you can see on your screen, as compared to DC Elite. And even when we go to the 3.5mm output, you can also see that the Tonfa is able to produce significantly more power than the DC Elite. Now, in short, is the DC-Tonfa a lot more powerful than the DC Elite? Yes, it's able to output more power. But is the DC Elite a dongle that actually isn't able to power many things? No. DC Elite in itself is already very powerful, and we will talk about what these 800 milliwatts per channel at 32 ohms mean for the DC-Tonfa and also on the DC Elite. Power is also only one small variable among many things. Power only means that it has enough juice to be able to reach volumes at a acceptable level for you, or in terms of DC-Tonfa and DC Elite, it's got far more power, more than enough juice to power, I think, every single IEM and even some headphones, simple to power headphones. And with this variable out of the way, it just means that you can then not worry about it having not enough power to power your IEMs and some of your headphones. But everything else in terms of how it sounds signature and how it's working in its pairing and synergy with everything else, that remains to be seen. So for now, we'll move on into the more bread and butter things, like the different chassis of the Tonfa and the DC Elite and the cases that comes with it. And for the DC Elite, it's actually, the chassis is made of titanium versus the Tonfa where it's aluminum. And in these two materials, you can already tell which one will be the more expensive variant, and that's the DC Elite. Now, of course, the DC Elite has packed in a lot more, and therefore it's slightly heavier at 60 grams, whereas the Tonfa, you can actually, when you compare them side by side, you do notice the difference of it being lighter, and it's only at 45 grams. The good thing about the Tonfa is that its case, and I'll show you here, you can see that with its accompanied case, it has MagSafe on it, and this adds additional layer of convenience when you have your iPhone and you can just put the Tonfa and attach it on your phone without it dangling around. So that I think it's a very nifty thing that iBasso has added to the DC-Tonfa. The next part, we're going to talk about volume knobs that you can see over here. The Tonfa has a digital volume encoder wheel, just like I think I don't think there are many dongles on the market with even a wheel knob that you can turn, but for iBasso, they do like to take this more analog approach in terms of being able to physically feel the buttons as compared to what's already very well known in the DC Elite, which is that the DC Elite has a 24-step analog attenuator. And what this does is, in short, when the full signal has already passed through, then the volume gets attenuated. And so there is no digital altering of the signal at all. And therefore, the DC Elite, you can actually even mechanically hear when you turn each step of the step attenuator, whereby you can literally almost mechanically hear the resistor disconnecting and connecting to the next step of the attenuator. And when you look at the other parts of the DC Elite and Tonfa, this is where you can see that the DC Tonfa is fitted with an OLED screen. And one of the main advantages of having an OLED screen is that you can check volume. Whereas the DC Elite, because of its 24-step attenuator and doesn't have an OLED screen attached to it, you can't really check what volume you are at. However, I think people who are getting used to DC Elite will know that you spin it clockwise or anti-clockwise, the volume goes up and goes down in accordance. So it's not something that you do always need a volume. However, for some people, this is an important feature. And the DC-Tonfa also allows more calibration, where it has different modes. Of course, it's got the non-oversampling, the fast roll-off, slow roll-off, and different gain settings. And with the OLED screen, it becomes easier for you to be able to see which modes you are on. The DC Elite takes a simpler view on things, and it's all via the indicator light that you can see at the side. And sometimes you would see it flashing red, and if it's red, please, you just need to press the button and turn it into green so that it properly renders the PCM. And if it's blue, then it means that it is decoding DSD. And white, now the white color is when you long press on the volume attenuator, okay? And so in these two differences, the DC Elite takes a simpler approach, whereas the DC-Tonfa has a more modern OLED screen attached to it. So now we finally get to the heart of the matter, and that is what's their individual signatures like, and what's its synergy with different pairings. I think it's an important thing or rather something interesting that we can think about. When we talk about sound signatures, it's actually always a comparative sound signature. You can't say, or rather everyone has their own comparisons or their own baseline to talk about, right? So actually sound signatures are always relative. So for example, for me, if I say that, oh, this is warm in relation to what? It's always warm in relation to something, right? So warm in relation to what I've heard. And therefore, I think it's very good to do a comparison video like this, where you have the DC-Tonfa and DC Elite, and you can actually do a actual A/B comparison, warm in relation to whom, which one is warmer, which one is less so, etc, etc. So let's get down into it. So with Tonfa's R2R setup and R2R setups, when done well, typically what does it do? It then allows a more natural presentation of timbre, and it's a tad warmer as well as compared to the DC Elite. The DC Elite sound signature it also has a very natural timbre. However, it's not as warm as the Tonfa. So again, we talk about this relative comparison A/B testing. And for the DC Elite, if you really want to talk about resolution, you want to talk about clarity, you want to talk about detail retrieval, these three, I think DC Elite performs better on all spectrums. Whether is it in its sub-bass, rumble, the tightness of sub-bass all the way to the bass, and in terms of the smoothness of its vocals, I think DC Elite really shines when you are a more analytical listener. You like to hear things, you like the transparency in your playback. Whereas the DC-Tonfa is really something that has this more organic timbre, and that warmer nature allows you to probably stay a bit more laid back, and you wouldn't be sitting there analyzing your music and thinking, oh, this note here isn't what I want to hear. It's a different form of enjoyment. So with these two, right, you get two vastly different representations on how you want your playback to be. And so we would say that the DC Elite and DC-Tonfa each have their own characteristics and strengths. And with these individual sound signatures that I've spoken about, you would think that it becomes very easy to pair. So, for example, if we look at the headphone Head D1, the headphone Head D1 is a pretty, I would say, very neutral sounding headphone. And the Head D1's a little bit of sparkle on its treble. And you would think that in terms of complementary pairings, the DC-Tonfa would pair quite well with it, right? Because DC-Tonfa has that warmer nature and it also is more full-bodied. But when you put it together with the headphone D1, that's not the case at all. It actually makes the vocals, especially female vocals, on the higher end side, moving on into the treble, whenever it comes to instruments, it makes it a little bit strident. And that actually is not the case when you pair D1 with the DC Elite. In the end, you achieve very, very good synergy. The DC Elite is able to bring out that smooth, buttery vocals on most of your playbacks, whether is it male or female vocals. And in terms of instruments, there's no shrillness or an overly bright signature that I'm not really a fan of. So in my eyes, pairings really makes a difference, and pairing is also a bit of an art. For us, we've paired over thousands of headphones together with sources, and what we found out is that very often it's not necessarily that, oh, because this has a warmer sound signature and it pairs with something of a brighter, cooler sound signature, it would actually work. It doesn't work that way most of the time. That's why it's so important to try, and that's why it's so important for us to work as curators of your music, to be able to say, oh, actually based on your sound signature, you would actually prefer this pairing, or you would actually prefer this setup. Now that being said, the Tonfa, for most cases, generally pair well with IEMs that are slightly of a brighter nature. So it actually does tame most IEMs of that nature quite well. And I think one of the best pairings that we have found out with the Tonfa is with the U9 limited edition Chue, or rather it's called the Mercury. And I think with the Mercury, it has this most beautiful pairing where Mercury's got this wide space, and this wide space with its very extended treble works very well when you pair it together with the DC-Tonfa, because the DC-Tonfa's warmth and DC-Tonfa's more full-natured representation blends and complements perfectly well with the Mercury. So if you're looking for a source for the U9 Mercury, I think the Tonfa is an absolute addition to what you're looking for. And there are also a lot of other IEMs of similar characteristics where you can come and explore here, and we can pair them well. You can see the Tonfa is very, very versatile, as is the DC Elite. They are both very versatile in different ways. But one thing's for sure, now we're going to talk about what that 800 milliwatts per channel actually means. For the Tonfa, at 800 milliwatts per channel at 32 ohms, now the headphone D1 the impedance is right at 32 ohms. So it's quite a good basis that we can talk about. Now, what do these figures actually translate to? We know that our hearing is on a logarithmic scale. So to save you the pain of having to do the math, right? Basically, the amount of power that you're going to get out of the DC-Tonfa, it is able to easily or theoretically go way above at listening ranges or decibels that would actually hurt your hearing. With this much about power, right? Without that actual cap on the headphone D1, we're looking at it being able to inject more than 120 over dB. And we all know that that loudness, that volume is going to hurt your ear. So please don't listen at that level. And then on DC Elite does, at the 4.4 output, it does look like it's able to output much less power. But even with that much less output power, when you pair it with the headphone D1, you still get more than enough juice. Way more than enough juice at dBs way above 106 dB in terms of full loudness that you can get. And I don't think you want to listen to your music at such a loud volume. So what does this mean in terms of layman representation? Is that both the DC Elite and DC-Tonfa, they have more than enough juice to be able to power all your IEMs and even certain headphones. And don't worry if you can see that, oh, the DC-Tonfa seems to be significantly able to inject more juice than DC Elite, but you actually don't need that. And if you want to listen to headphones that are even more difficult to power, you should be looking at music players to be able to do that far better, or maybe even the portable DAC amp setups, which we will talk about in further videos, of course. So who should get which, the DC Elite or Tonfa? I think this is a question that everyone's looking for, right? I would say that the Tonfa is a side step in terms of the range of dongles that you would like to have. Like if you would to look at your playback and you just want to sit back, relax, listen to your playback, and be emotionally connected to your music, I think the DC-Tonfa would be a good addition to your different range of sources. Lets you take away from having to analyze too much about your playback. Now, that's not to say that for the DC Elite you will be sitting there listening to every single note, right? That's not true. Just that the DC Elite's representation is less warm than the Tonfa. And the DC Elite has certain things going for it. For example, it's got much better resolution. It's got much better clarity and transparency in terms of what it's able to do for all your music playback. I think also in terms of it being able to project that smooth, buttery signature, I think while they both have that, for me the DC Elite still does that a little bit better, just a tad better. And my personal preference is still the DC Elite. Actually at Zeppelin Co, right, we've had a lot of people who own both, because as we mentioned, it's a side step, and I can see users who would want to listen to different sources based on the different mood and setting that they are in. I think these are the two different types of representations you can see in both DC Elite and Tonfa. And I think one important thing which I cannot stress enough, which was mentioned earlier in the video, is that between DC Elite and Tonfa, there is a price difference. And the Tonfa is priced by at least $120 lower than the DC Elite. So for all intents and purposes, right, the DC Elite and the Tonfa are not competing on even levels, right? And therefore it should be seen as a competition. Who listen to a lot of vocals would really appreciate the Tonfa as one of the dongles that they will be carrying with them and using for a very long time. And how do you actually make this choice? You do make this choice, and the easiest way is to come here to audition and then you make that choice, because both are available here, right? And they're both available at Zeppelin. And I think in terms of being able to make your choice, that pairing also matters. So bring your IEMs along with you to be able to know what's the best selection and which dongle to actually get. And in conclusion, the Tonfa certainly is not a replacement for the DC Elite. I think it will be just a very nice side step that adds to iBasso's very nice and impressive array of dongles for your selection. And it just allows your IEM to be able to have more synergy with different sources and be able to get more bang for your buck out of all your current existing setups. Where can you get the Tonfa and the DC Elite if you want to? I think everyone already knows we are exclusive in Vietnam, so please come to the audio people. The car will be your guiding path to find our store, or otherwise you can go to Google. And in Singapore, of course, you can go to Zeppelin Co, where Zeppelin Co is the general distributor of iBasso in the entire of Singapore. Finally, if you reach the end of this video, we would like to thank all of you guys for your support so far. We've started YouTube on a relatively new journey, and so we really appreciate it if you can follow us and subscribe to our channel. And that way you'll be able to get nice pop-ups and notifications whenever we post a new video every week. Currently, our schedule is on Thursday, and I'll see you again next week. Bye.